This case is just the beginning of the fight. It is not the end. We are not going to rest until every child is protected, until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth. That's what we're fighting for, and we will not stop until we achieve it.
That was conservative commentator Matt Walsh outside the Supreme Court yesterday. Inside the court, the justices were hearing oral arguments over whether Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for adolescents should be upheld. And if the court sides with Tennessee, it could have sweeping consequences nationwide. Should the court rule in Tennessee's favor, the decision will have widespread ramifications for transgender youth living in one of the roughly 24 states who have passed similar laws restricting minors' access to gender-affirming care. Based on the court's heavy conservative slant and lines of questioning from the conservative justices, it is expected the court will do just that. But outside of the court, we saw what the right's ultimate goal is: demonizing, dehumanizing, and erasing trans people. In addition to Walsh, Marjorie Taylor Greene she also spoke. Over a loud chorus of boos, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene declared that the pro-transgender position comes from Satan. What you're hearing is the outcry from the demons in those that worship evil that are abusing our children, brainwashing our children, she said of protesters jeering at her. Greene touted her efforts to pass legislation that would make it a felony to perform so-called gender-affirming care on any child in America in all 50 states, as well as the support she claims from the incoming Trump-Vance administration. Greene recently sponsored legislation that would ban transgender members of Congress and other government employees from using Capitol Hill facilities that match their gender identity. Now, I do want to point out that while a favorable outcome in this case is not expected, history was made during the arguments. The ACLU's Chase Strangio became the first trans attorney to argue before the Supreme Court. Cenk, have you been following this case? What do you think of it?
Yeah, so what I think of the policy is interesting and nuanced. And what I think about it legally is interesting and nuanced. But first, look, I've been trying to find a word that is not offensive for the extreme ends of the spectrum, right? Extreme radicals sound offensive. So I've decided whether other people use it or not, I'm going to use max left and max right, okay? So this unfortunately is a good instance of both of them having issues, one issue being far, far worse, okay? So in this case, the ACLU lawyer you're talking about, I love that the brother set history there and is the first trans person to argue in front of the Supreme Court. That's a great day in America. Just another stepstone in equality, right? Now, at the same time, he was on TV the other day saying 2-year-olds know if they're trans. And I'm like, that's nuts, totally nuts. 2-year-olds don't know anything. 2-year-olds often don't know their names. How do they know if they're trans and ready for hormone surgery? Are you nuts? So I don't agree with him on that at all. I don't know why he would say such an absurd thing, right? Okay, now let's go to the max right and the clip we just showed you. Far, far worse. Talking about what? They're not going to stop until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth. Now, when you talk with that kind of language, what do you think that trans people are going to think? It sounds like you're trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. Like, don't tell me that this is just about, hey, a disagreement about puberty blockers, because we're about to have that conversation. That's not the conversation you're having. You and Marjorie Taylor Greene, when you say it's satanic, are having a conversation about how we should all hate trans people and we should wipe them out. And so if you say, oh, no, it has plausible deniability because he didn't say trans people, he said ideology. Okay, shoe on the other foot. Let's try. Oh yeah, the left is not going to stop until Christian ideology is entirely erased from the earth. Does that sound good? You like that one? Until white ideology is wiped from the earth. Does that sound good? No, it doesn't sound good. It sounds terrible. Why does it sound terrible? Because you're obviously attacking that group, okay? And you're hiding behind one word, pretending that you don't mean to, but it's not. You're not even hiding anymore. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying trans people are satanic. So how is that not deeply, deeply hateful? So right wing, if you want us to have a reasonable conversation in this country, I'm not going to have conversations with the max right who are lunatics on this. So sorry, no, I'm not going to agree to taking away people's constitutional rights, etc. So now when you get to the actual substance of it, Jordan, look, my point of view on it is, I think what the Supreme Court does is it takes, all courts do, but here we are on the Tennessee law. It says, does the state have enough interest to take away individual rights, right? So that's the question at hand. And where I would draw that line is, if you're talking about irreversible physical surgery, I would say that the state has enough interest in that to be able to prevent it. If you're talking about puberty blockers, I say the state does not have enough interest, because remember what the state is doing, in this case, Tennessee. They're saying not just the kids, and not just the doctors, but the parents are not allowed to decide. That big government is going to decide instead of the parents. And I don't agree with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think the government should really weigh in any of these circumstances. If that's what the parents and their kids want to do, even if you're talking about some sort of operation, I don't care. It's not my business. It's not my kid, and those aren't my parents. And it's also why they're doing it, which won't be part of the rationale, but they're doing it because of the language we're seeing outside of the court, because this is part of a larger right-wing play to demonize and dehumanize, and in their minds, they think they can erase trans people, but they're not going anywhere. And we have to stand up for them, because I don't even think, and I know the court is, nuanced, and they're going to look at the letter of the law and consider whether or not trans people or trans adolescents deserve quasi-suspect classification, stuff that isn't going to really resonate outside of the court. But it's just, this is the party for limited or small government, or so I thought. And here they are yet again. Whenever it affects a marginalized group, whenever it affects powerless people, then all of a sudden, or something they don't like abortion, then all of a sudden they want the government in your personal life, because they want to create a, largely white Christian nationalist society. And anyone who doesn't fit within that neat framework doesn't have rights. It's not going to stop there. They've done it with reproductive rights. They're doing it with trans people. They will wield the law to discriminate, and they do not care if it doesn't mesh with their limited government ideals. So like I said, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be a favorable outcome, because Trump has stacked the court. And the lines of questioning, I listened to most of the argument yesterday, the questioning was not encouraging even from Roberts. So it's just, it's sad. Here we are again. We're going to see another attack on trans people, and it's disheartening.
Yeah. So look, last things I'll say here is that, look, one of the methods that I use for trying to be as unbiased as I can is I take the question out of its current context and put it in a different context. So if, for example, it had nothing to do with trans issues, but a religious group came and said, hey, we want to do circumcisions, and the family wants to do it, doctor wants to do it, should the government be able to block a circumcision? I would say no, okay, because that is not a permanent thing. Well, it's permanent, but it's arguably harmless, right? And a lot of doctors believe that it's harmless, and at least there's a debate about it. But if a religious group came and said, our religious practices are, we just completely cut the genitals, I would say no. The state can step in, has an interest in protecting that child. You're not allowed to do that, okay? So just as a way of thinking about how the state can and can't interfere, and what standards that you should use. So, but if we wanted to have a reasonable conversation about where do we draw the line? Do we draw it at surgery? Do we draw it at puberty blockers, et cetera? That would be one thing. But overall, I think Jordan is right that is not the conversation Matt Walsh and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the right wing are trying to have. They're trying to demonize trans people under the guise of a conversation about puberty blockers to drive hatred so that they could take advantage of that hatred for their own political gains.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.